Richard Skipper celebrates. Every show is a celebration. Each show, Richard delivers the artists you love, showcasing what makes them unique. Never gossipy. The antidote to a sometimes hectic world. Now, here's your host, Richard Skipper.
Happy Thursday, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of Richard Skipper Celebrates. For those of you who are returning, welcome back. And for those of you who are here for the first time, my show is all about celebrating artists and their body of worth. Tonight, it's a huge celebration. We have so much to celebrate. Today, the CDC has lifted the mask ban and socially distancing for those of us who have been vaccinated. So I hope you got your vaccines. We are also going to be celebrating re-emerging films tonight. Jeff L. Lieberman and Bella Abzug. What a woman. And this film, I am so excited about this film coming out. I can only imagine this woman now in the streets of New York and around the country fighting for everything that we are currently fighting for in this film. As you will see in a few moments, we're going to show the trailer. Barbra Streisand said she was ahead and everyone had to catch up with her. Well, tonight, we're going to catch up with her, and we're going to start to give her due once again as we lead up to this incredible film. And on the other side, you will meet filmmaker Jeff L. Lieberman.
Do you know me? Let's make this political power structure ours.
I don't need permission.
It's because of the killing of the spirit and the meaning and the belief of American democracy that I do impeach the President of the United States.
When Bella first ran, it was considered such a unicorn event. There just weren't that many women running. She was blunt, she was candid, she was poking the beast.
Would you support Nixon's 31?
Walking in the street with Bella, people would be yelling, "Give 'em hell, Bella." If a doorman or a taxi driver said something she disagreed with, she would argue with him because she really cared.
I wanted her to get elected because we desperately needed her voice. So I went out with her on this truck. She'd laugh and she'd joke and she'd speak Yiddish to the Jewish men and women.
That people have to live. People have a fundamental right to eat.
When she got to Washington, it was an explosion.
Are you suggesting to me that all of your files of the CIA are presently in the possession of the FBI?
I will refuse to have you say we are arbitrarily acting in this regard, Madam Chairman.
Also, for a lot of us women, most of our lives we were told to shut up and sit down. And it was very encouraging to be with a woman who was saying to us, "Speak up."
Gay rights now!
In another groundbreaking effort, she introduced the first national gay and lesbian rights bill. Bella was way ahead of the curve. And the rest of the world had to catch up.
What's happening here? Are they, whoever they are they trying to do something to you?
Mrs. Abzug said her CIA file dated back to 1953 and included reports on her anti-war activities and Vietnamese contacts.
I'm here in the New York delegation with Bella Abzug and her famous hat. Do you ever take that on?
What a question.
Taking all those barbs and even worse from men who should have known better. A real organized effort to create a monster who's not liked.
I'm not running against Bill. I'm running to represent the people. The people desperately need representation. I was also very involved in the 50s in the South, where justice for blacks was very hard to come by. I was involved in some very famous cases.
Time is rapidly running out for Willie McGee, and down here right below us they are.
I can't imagine what he was thinking. This young, beautiful woman come to the courthouse to defend him.
When we execute Willie McGee, we have to execute his white women lawyer at the same time.
I was bold because of Bella. Bella and those other Congress women, they spoke up, they spoke out, they organized, they challenged, and I felt capable to do that and a responsibility to do it.
There is not even one woman among the 100 U.S. senators
She did like to be first, but I was afraid she would lose everything.
There's got to be a certain element of party loyalty.
I don't remember Bella ever sharing doubts or concerns about anything. She would just say, gotta get in there and fight.
Perhaps no one since Robert Kennedy has inspired the kind of devotion and the kind of opposition that Bella Abzug inspires.
We will now have not a woman only in the House, but a woman in the White House. She was just too early.
She was just too real.
She knew that she wasn't there just for Bella and her generation, that she was there to make sure that the doors were open for what came next.
And here he is, Jeff L. Lieberman. I have to say, first of all, I cannot wait to see this film. I am such a fan of documentaries, and you capture so much excitement just in this trailer. I can't even imagine the excitement that we're going to feel seeing this woman on screen again and telling her story. Welcome to the show. And before we start, I want to start with where we are. Today marks 425 days, believe it or not, since our theaters shut down here in New York, and you've become a New Yorker yourself. How have you been doing over the last year and almost a year and a half with the world that we've been living in?
Well, you know, as someone who worked from home pre-pandemic, it hasn't been as awful for me as it has been for many people. But yeah, it's been a tough time, and as someone who works in film and who's seen all the film festivals shut down and our cinemas shut down, and you know, it's been a hard time to be an independent filmmaker with a new product that we're really excited to get out to audiences, and you know, that already small place where we can showcase our independent films got a lot smaller this past year. So I'm hopeful and optimistic that things are going to reopen and we can get this film out there and have real screenings with real people and real talkbacks, and you know, have that experience again.
I want to be there at that first screening. So I want to ask you, you were born in Vancouver, Canada. I have a few, almost 2 decades on you. Where did the interest for this little boy growing up in Canada about Bella Abzug begin for you? And when did you first become aware of who she was and how important she was in our history?
Well, being Jewish, I think there's a strong connection immediately to Bella Abzug. For me, you know, we have a good amount of Jewish heroes, but no one quite like Bella Abzug, who got in there and fought for equality and so many of the progressive values that I hold dear. And Bella was a personality. I was immediately attracted to her just as a person, with the hats and the bravado and the accent and the coordinating outfits and just the way she could command an audience. I mean, she was really a performer in many ways. And that was really exciting. And also, of course, towards her stance for equality, especially for LGBTQ people. That was something that, you know, spoke a lot to me. And she was doing it well before it was in vogue or popular.
Yes.
Yeah. She took a lot of risks, and how could you not identify with someone like that? I first heard of her through the documentary New York, a documentary film, which is one of my favorite documentaries. It's a Rick Burns film. It's, I think, like 10 hours or 20 hours or something. That's a huge commitment. And she appears in that film as an interview. And when I saw her, I was like, who is this woman? So that's how I got introduced to her, a little bit later than a lot of other people. Because she's not taught in school. She's not part of the curriculum. So we're trying to change that with this film.
I think this film is going to change that. I want to go back to your childhood, and we're going to talk about your path that led you to where you are now. But I know it's you, and you have a sister, Leanne. Is it just the two of you, or did you have other brothers and sisters?
No, I have another sister named Marcy, who's a nurse and a mother, and she lives in Vancouver with my parents, who are there too. Yeah.
Now, I always like to go back to the 5-year-old Jeff L. Lieberman, because to me, it's that point in a person's life before you start school, before the layers of peer pressure and teachers get put upon you, what you should be, what you shouldn't be. Can you tell us a little bit about that little boy?
Well, I was Jeffrey back then. Okay. That was my given name, and I shortened my name in about grade 6, so I was still Jeffrey at that point. I think the strong theme for me that I recall was a love of television, film, entertainment, theater, music, jazz music. Not when I was 5, but those elements all started coming to play. And I was definitely attracted to New York City as like a place where all of these things were converging and happening. I was a big follower of watching the news, especially American news. I was kind of sitting on the sidelines of Canada, peering into the United States with a fascination about the things that were going on then. And this would have been, 80s, so it was the Reagan era. And, television was still maybe limited to a few, 3, 5, 10 channels, 13 channels. We didn't have cable, so I was sort of, American cable wasn't in Canada.
And it was very rare also that you would even see documentary films at that time.
Yeah. So, and I wasn't even sure that I was going to go into documentary, but I knew I was going to go into television of some sort, sitcoms or films or something of that nature. So
now, if I read correctly, you started out as a journalist, and I read that you still consider yourself first and foremost a journalist.
Absolutely, yeah. No, journalism has been a big part of my education, and then my career. I feel like documentary filmmaking is journalism.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's investigation, it's research, it's fact finding, it's fact checking. It just gives you more time and space to tell a story. You saw that trailer. We had to jam pack a lot into 4 minutes, and even still, it's kind of bursting at the seams. But there's so much that we wanted to tell and make sure, was teased about Bella in that trailer. And news stories is the same. You have to pack a lot into 2 minutes, usually 2.5 minutes. So documentary film is kind of a luxury in time. You still have to tell an entire story in about 90 minutes, 99 with this film. But it's the same methods of storytelling, figuring out the arc of a story and bringing people along for an informative and entertaining view of a story.
And I really want to talk about the process in a few moments, but the road from journalism to documentaries. When, where, and how, first of all, did you make the move to New York?
I moved to New York twice, actually. I moved right out of university. I went to college in Toronto, and I didn't even stick around for my graduation. I moved to New York in 2000 and had an internship with CNN. And that was sort of going to be my big break into news and journalism in New York City. And I kind of ran into a lot of red tape with being a Canadian and not having work papers and visas and that kind of thing. So I moved to Los Angeles about a year or so later after going back to Canada, and did a program at UCLA and started working for a production company that did all the behind the scenes making of the movie documentary producing. So that's how I really got into the documentary side, was through this making of the movie type work, type producing. And I saw that you could make a movie, you could make a documentary feature kind of piecemeal without having a huge budget. And to me, it was a much more accessible way of making a film. And I was decided that I would start my first independent project that way, as a documentary, without a huge movie budget, without having to hire.
Was that Re-Emerging Jews in Nigeria?
That was the first film.
And like Steven Spielberg, according to your Wikipedia page, you chose, like he did with his first film, to call your film company Re-Emerging Films, which I think is the perfect apropos title for your film company. When you started working on your first documentary film, what, first of all, is the seed that got planted for you? And what was the driving force that kept you to go through to completion? Because my guess is that wasn't an easy film to make.
No, it wasn't easy at all. The film is about groups of people in Nigeria who believe that their ancestral roots are Jewish, and they're there practicing Judaism. And I found out about them through a rabbi who had previously gone to visit them in Nigeria, an American rabbi who came to LA afterwards and did a slideshow presentation. Rabbi Howard Gorin came to the Gay and Lesbian Synagogue in Los Angeles and showed these amazing photographs. And the one that sticks in my memory always is this little hut in what looks like a forest or jungle, and if you look closer, there's a Star of David on the front, and it was a synagogue. And I was just so fascinated by that imagery, and that something so simple could be so profound. And that's always
that photograph that planted the seed for you.
Yeah.
Wow.
And in filmmaking, you're always looking for something visual. So to me, that was sort of like a light bulb went off. And I approached Rabbi Gorin afterwards and asked him if I could join him on his next trip to Nigeria and, maybe film something and see what comes of it. And he had never, brought anyone with him. All the photographs were just things he had taken with his small camera. So, a few months later, he said, yes, if you're actually serious and interested, go get your vaccinations, go get your visa. We're leaving in 3 months.
Wow.
And fear kind of set in. And my parents, to their credit, when I revealed to them that I was thinking of traveling, taking off time from work and traveling, to Nigeria, they encouraged me completely and told me not to be scared.
Awesome. Yes. Now, did you have a film crew at all working with you, or were you working on your own doing all this?
I tried to get a film crew interested. I reached out to several people I knew in LA, and nobody was willing to join. I didn't have a budget, so I couldn't really offer any money, and nobody was really willing to take the adventure. Mm-hmm. So, but they all sort of guided me in a camera to rent and audio gear and how to do some makeshift lighting. So they were really helpful. And then once I was in Nigeria, several people always sort of came to my assistance, carrying things or helping me set up a light or holding a bounce board. And we ended up filming the interviews outdoors. So we just basically used natural light, or I use natural light. Mm-hmm. And, the power is very inconsistent in Nigeria. And I was most worried about being able to charge batteries and have enough battery to keep going. And that was in the days when you had tapes. So I had, a shoebox full of tapes that I was, protected and carrying around. So it was an adventure, and it was a tricky film to make, but it was.
And from start to finish, how long did it take you?
It took me, I think, about 5 years. And to be honest, a couple of those years were just kind of me being hesitant to release it. Just since it was my first film, I really wanted to make sure it was right. And I think I sort of learned from that, it was what it was. And my sister wrote 3 books on that.
You answered my next question. I was going to ask, what was the major learning curve for you from this film? What was the experience like the first time that you're sitting in the theater and you're seeing your documentary on film, on the screen, I mean?
Sheer panic. You just hope that like everything's going to go right, and that the little things that you kind of hate in the film, or that don't work, or that are, sort of band-aids that they won't stick out to people. They never really do. The film inside and out, and they don't. So it's sort of a foolish concern. But eventually,
that night, did you consider that the film was a completed work, or did you go back and tweak it a little bit more?
I think the 92nd Street Y wanted to premiere the film, and I kind of was like, I'm not ready. And they basically gave me a date and said, take it or leave it. And that pushed me into premiering. And I think I made minor changes after that, but that was really an amazing night.
That's great. And after that film, your next film, was that Harlem?
No, it was The Amazing Nina Simone.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And again, I'm a huge Nina Simone fan. What was the seed for you to do that film?
So after reemerging, I was kind of thinking about what to do next. And I had been a fan of Nina Simone's for a long, long time, since high school. And always sort of felt like I never completely understood her. Mm-hmm. And I was listening to her music not the way she recorded it. I was sort of buying compilation CDs, and it was a whole mixture of music. And I couldn't really place anything. And this was before Wikipedia. There wasn't much written about her at that time. There were no books on her. And she wasn't really included in civil rights history or women's history or American history. So I was really trying to piece together this live recording with a studio recording, from early stuff to late stuff. And by the time I was looking to make this next project, there were a few books on her. Nadine Cahotis had written this amazing, very thorough biography called Princess Noire, and she had dug up a ton of information. And so I kind of wanted to take that and add all the visual and sound and film and present Nina's story to all the fans and to the people who didn't know her. And I just thought, when you work on a film, it's something you have to work on for many years. Mm-hmm. And I thought, what would I want to do that I really love? And that was Nina Simone. So I started that process.
And when you started that process, was it an easier process because you had already gotten your foot in the water, so to speak? Or was it just as hard starting on this project as it was with the first one?
Well, like the first one, I had no budget. So there was the equal challenge of how do you make a film for not a lot of money? And how do you just get going? Because you could spend years grant writing and fundraising and begging and hobnobbing, and you just don't get anywhere. So my sort of goal is always just to start and to get things rolling and to show people it's not a fantasy, it's a reality, and there'll be a finished product that you can see one day and be a part of too, if you so choose. So it was similar in that sense. I didn't have to travel as far initially. The first few interviews I did were in Nina's hometown of Tryon, North Carolina. Mm-hmm. And I had gone to...
not far from where
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
I had gone to show Reemerging at a Gullah Geechee festival in South Carolina, and I was going to be very close to Tryon. So I reached out to Chris Armbrust, the man who basically runs everything Nina and Tryon, and said, I'd like to visit and maybe make a film if you think it's possible. And when I arrived, he had lined up all the interviews with Nina's childhood friends. So it was just a gift that from the very beginning. And once I had those on tape, I knew I just had to keep going, and that this was a real film.
What was the biggest surprise for you about Nina Simone that really blew your mind working on the film?
That's a good question. I think the thing that sort of always stood out to me was that she was so misunderstood. Not to echo one of her songs, but I think that really is a true description of her. I was surprised at how many people thought she was drunk all the time, or that she was quote unquote crazy. People would tell me they saw her in concert and she was drunk, or she was high, or she was crazy. And I think they sort of missed the artistic genius of her by not realizing how unusual she was, sometimes intentionally, sometimes to command an audience, sometimes to silence an audience, sometimes to work them just into kind of a spell that she talked about. So that to me was fascinating. The people who knew her never thought that. They all saw the intentions behind her work. But I really wanted the public to know the genius behind the performance and the reason she behaved in the way she did. And also just because she was demanding equality, she was demanding justice, when very few people would take that very courageous step from the stage of Carnegie Hall or at music festivals in front of mainly white audiences, demanding, Black equality. And so you got to be kind of a little bit unusual or a little bit out there, kind of like Bella too.
Well, I was going to say that's a theme that runs through all of your films. Was that your intent starting out with these films?
Maybe on a subconscious level, yes. I'm definitely attracted to courageous, brave, bold, heroic people who are under-celebrated, underreported, not given their due legacy. And that's definitely true of both Bella and Nina, and definitely of the communities in Nigeria too, where people, don't know their story well enough yet. So,
and even with your film on Harlem, where you're talking, the film is about gentrification. There are so many things that I think you could do a whole series on gentrification from every marginalized group in the history of the United States. I think you've got a whole series there. At least I'm going to give you a lot of work to do. But let's go into Bella, which is what we're here to talk about tonight. When do you make your mind up that you're going to create a film? Is it something that you keep close to your vest? Or is this something that you start telling other people to get their feedback on, to get their feel for where this film will go?
I try not to be too public when I have an idea, because ideas are few, and they're the sort of the golden element of any project. So there is a little bit of caution when you start a project and you want to make sure that it's going to be unique to you. But at a certain point, you do want to start sharing it and not have it be so contained that it doesn't get out there. And you want to, start slowly building a community of people who are going to support the film, appreciate the film, look forward to the film, share it. But as you mentioned as well, there's definitely people who I share the project with and gather their feedback and their time and attention and ideas about where to go and how is this cut working, how is this trailer looking, what do you think of this song, what do you think about adding these elements, how do we make it current, how do we keep it relevant. I'm very blessed to be working with a lot of great people, especially several core women on this film who have given me tons of feedback on all aspects of the film, and I'm very grateful to them for being a part of it.
And when you start on a film such as Bella, do you put on paper what you want the film to look like on screen? Or is this something that takes a life of its own? I'm sure that even when you do have it on paper, that it's going to take a life of its own. But how does the process unfold for you?
Well, Bella, for example, with Bella, her life story kind of presents itself at first. So you have the natural twists and turns of her story. It's kind of an arc, a 3-act arc that you can kind of follow. But where those exact moments kind of land is where you're not really sure. So I personally do lay things out on paper, what the 3 acts would look like. But it's changed so much since that first outline. Yeah, and it changed again in multiple cuts of the film too, just based on feedback and the current times that we're living in, how much that's changed, you know. So it needs to fall into a historical category, but also a current category too of where we are in the world, because we want Bella to be kind of an inspiration and a guiding point for any moment in time, but especially this moment.
Well, I was going to ask you, I mean, you're creating the film. When did you complete the film? First of all, let's start there.
The film is, let's say, 90% completed. It's definitely very close to being done, but we've been working on it for about 3-4 years now, from when we just started developing the idea. And obviously COVID and the pandemic has slowed things down a lot, and this past year hasn't been as we've been working on it, but it hasn't been as productive as if it didn't.
And you've also had, on top of that, forgive me for going here, 4 very bizarre years leading to where we are now. The Black Lives Matter movement, the more inclusion in film and television, everything. How have these moments that are happening now made an impact on the film?
Well, when we started, we thought Hillary Clinton was going to be president. Let's start there. So originally, the film was going to be the woman who blazed the path for Hillary Clinton to be president. So that was kind of the opening montage was going to be, that historic celebration, and then it sort of turned into, why did this happen? Are women not really? Is there some sort of bias against women when they're trying to run for office, and how can we kind of combat that? And then it sort of morphed into, somewhat of a response to Donald Trump, which is still, very relevant today with Trumpism and everything going on.
Liz Cheney.
Liz Cheney, yeah. But we also really wanted to make this a celebration of Kamala Harris and her victory, because that's historic, and that's a direct connection between Bella and the suffragettes, and then Bella and Shirley Chisholm and the women of the 70s and the second wave feminist movement, and to today with Nancy Pelosi and Hillary and Kamala. So I really wanted to show the through line of women building upon women and breaking down these barriers and getting to Bella's goal of 50-50.
I love the fact that you include that clip where the reporter asked her about her hat, because that's still going on. Even more so now, I think. That's one element that has not left us. And hopefully, again, your film will engender some change in that department. Once you got it, you started putting it out that you were working on this film. As far as the connections that you needed, the people that you wanted, the Holy Grail interviews, you look at the women that you have in this film. I mean, couldn't you get any major names to do this film? I mean, every single one of those women and the impact that they've each made on our culture, on our lives, with their own activism. Bravo to you. Bravo. And bravo to them.
It's really them. And it's really Bella. I take no credit in securing any of those interviews, because I really feel like It was them wanting to support Bella as they did in the 70s and 80s. They wanted to be a part of this film because we laid the groundwork, but they wanted to talk about Bella and how much her legacy matters, and how much the world would be very different if Bella was given the opportunities that she really deserved, and that more women deserve, and more little girls deserve to hear these stories.
Absolutely.
So I'm very, very grateful to all the women in the film and the men, but it really makes a huge difference in having them be a part of the story. So I'm tremendously grateful.
When you've got a certain narrative that you're beginning to tell, and you get an interview with someone such as Barbra Streisand or Shirley MacLaine or Lily Tomlin, they each have their own stories to tell as well, not only individually, but in connection with Bella. Do their stories in any way begin to shape the direction of the film? Or when you sit down for these interviews, do you have specific questions and a specific direction that you want to go in?
My goal is to always have the interviews tell the story. And in this film, this is the first time I've never done a film with narration, which is 10 times harder to do. And but it's sort of, the more in vogue thing with documentaries. And I think it's always a nice creative challenge to try something new. Mm-hmm. And because we also have Bella telling a lot of her story through an oral history, she also acts as a bit of a narrator. So we have that as kind of a guiding factor. So when I do the interviews, I really do want them to touch on the talking points, the turning points in Bella's story. But, memory is one thing, and what people want to talk about is also another thing. And so you kind of let the interview go in the direction that it's just naturally meant to go in. So I certainly have a list of questions tailored for each person based on my research and the experience that I believe they had with someone like Bella. But you never know where it's going to go and how much they're going to remember or care to share, that kind of thing. So there's always a great element of surprise, which is really nice. And of the three people you mentioned, I think each went in a very different direction. Some, Lily remembered particular marches or protests or conventions that she attended with Bella. While Shirley MacLaine remembered more of the personal time that they shared together, the friendship time, walking on a beach, or going to a party, that kind of thing. And then Barbra Streisand had very specific memories of campaigning with Bella. Mm-hmm. Something we really wanted to talk about, like you saw in the trailer, going down that flatbed truck.
I love that.
So that was great to have the story and the visual elements too from that.
And as a filmmaker, how much of your story is brought into Bella's story?
I think the Jewish element was interesting to me. It might have been less interesting to a non-Jewish filmmaker. So that's something that I certainly thought was important to tell. Also, her work with gay rights and gay equality was important to me. So I wanted to make sure.
He froze. Hopefully this is going to come back. If you can hear me, Jeff, sometimes this happens. The best thing to do, unless the freeze lifts, is, there you are again. I missed that. If you could repeat what you just said.
I'm sorry, did I freeze?
You froze.
Okay.
But it was a wonderful freeze, by the way.
Okay. I was saying that the Jewish element was part of the story that I thought was important to tell, as was the gay and lesbian LGBTQ part of Bella's history, her fighting for the equality bill and campaigning in the Continental Baths and really reaching out to the gay community very early on in Greenwich Village in 1970 when she first ran. I thought it was interesting to me, but I thought it was remarkable that she felt so comfortable being a straight woman and reaching out to the newly organized.
Can you? I mean, I know, but if you can put in your own words, in context of what that was like in 1970 for our viewers and listeners, for her to do something such as to go to the Continental Baths, and there may be some people here who don't even know what the baths are. So if you can, in your own words.
Yeah. So 1970, when Bella first ran for Congress, she basically ran from the Greenwich Village where she lived, and the district was kind of a J shape that went down to the Lower East Side and up to Chelsea. So she was covering a wide swath of Manhattan that included, Chinatown and Jewish Russian immigrants in Lower East Side, but also the gay community who was, kind of centered around Greenwich Village.
And it was still illegal at that time to be openly gay in New York, by the way.
Right. And Stonewall had only happened the year before, the raid on the famous gay bar. So it was still very unsafe to be openly gay, even in New York City, a progressive city like that. People were, going to bars, but not revealing their identity at work because they would potentially be fired for being gay. And Bella walked into a GAA meeting, the Gay Activist Alliance, in 1970 and spoke to the group. And, it was remarkable for them to have, just any straight person, not to undermine that gay people, just to have her come was remarkable for an outsider to come and voice her support for their rights and their protections and their safeties was amazing. And the fact that she was running for Congress was even more influential. And the Continental Baths were basically a large swimming pool and performance space, and a place where one could be nude if they wanted to be. It was largely popular with gay men in the 70s. Bette Midler famously got her start there with Barry Manilow. And several of the gay activists that Bella was friendly with took her campaigning there one night in 72. And she spoke and gave a rousing kind of speech to all the guys standing there in their towels. Mm-hmm. And as one of our interviewees, Alan Roscoff, retells, he was there. At the end of her speech, all the guys took their towels off and threw them on stage. So, Bella got an eyeful and an earful, but I think it showed her the people.
Now, obviously, the times are a little different now, very different from what it was at that point. What was the news impact for that to happen when she did it?
You mean what? How did the news
how did the news cover it, or was it even covered in the news?
I don't think it was really covered. I didn't see it in my research. I saw it in gay magazines and gay newspapers. They certainly were covering the event because it was important to the gay community. Mm-hmm. But I think the press at the time was very one-sided with Bella. They saw her as kind of a character, a New York personality without substance. Sometimes she got good press, and sometimes she was awarded for the, really effective change that she made in Congress. But on the campaign stump, a lot of the times it was, oh, Bella again kind of thing.
She was always an activist, but what do you think was the turning point for her when everything began to shift and people started to take her seriously? Because it was very unusual for her to be running for the House of Representatives at that time. And she came out of literally nowhere to do this. And all of a sudden she's getting national recognition. What was the turning point for her that caused that?
She talks a lot about going scuba diving in the Caribbean and going under the water and just being by herself and having a moment of time to sort of reflect on her whole life. And she was 50 at this time. And she says she decided then and there that she was going to run for office. I think it was sort of an accumulation of a lot of things. She was an activist in the peace movement. She was part of a founding member of Women's Strike for Peace, which was really active in the 1960s, first against nuclear proliferation and nuclear testing, but then against the Vietnam War. And they became so sort of well organized and so respected, at least among New York politicians, that people running for office, men running for office, would come to someone like Bella and seek their endorsement. And she would give them her stamp of approval if she felt they were worthy. But oftentimes they sort of failed on their promises. And she talks about not wanting to support any more men who just aren't going to fall back on their promises. And she thought she was more qualified and better prepared and better studied than all these guys. And she's like, I could run and do a better job. The question was could she get elected? And she decided she was going to try. And she launched a full, almost like a presidential style campaign with buttons. I got one of them right here. And bumper stickers and shopping bags. She gave away shopping bags at the subway stops.
And for most of the 70s, she was in office. 9 years that she served?
She served 6 years in the House of Representatives, 3 terms.
And going back, I want to ask, when did you, I'm sure maybe I'm the first person to ask you this question, but when did you become a feminist?
That's a good question. I'm not sure I could put an exact, well, it was definitely my childhood. My mom had sort of a late blooming feminist recognition or coming to terms with the idea. And she decided that she wanted to go full-time to work, that she had been working part-time, but she really wanted to kind of completely reshuffle her life and a new career. And we always tell this famous story of the Mother's Day. I gave her a pair of oven mitts, and she refused to accept them. And she told me to go back to the mall and return them. And I think I was 10, 11, 12, somewhere on those.
Well, what did that do for you psychologically?
At the moment, it sort of like hurt me. It really I didn't understand it completely. But over a slow period of time, we talked about it, and she said, oven mitts are a gift for the kitchen, and I'm not the kitchen, and that's not me. And if you want to give me a card that you make or something, that reflects more of our relationship, I'll happily accept that. So I guess that's really the moment I became a feminist. I saw women as being completely equal to men and capable of doing all things that any gender can do.
And are you an activist beyond the work that you put on in film?
Yeah, I believe so. I've been marching for a good portion of last year when the protests against George Floyd's murder began in New York. I was right there and felt it was really important to keep it going, that the momentum was important, and my presence would help keep the momentum. So I definitely believe strongly in Black Lives Matter and a lot of other causes. So I'm certainly an activist, and I think filmmaking, it's an impartial, unbiased attempt to tell a story, but there's also some activism in the topics you choose to tell and the educational elements that go along with documentary filmmaking and narrative filmmaking.
And in today's world, where do you see some of the biggest impact that Bella Abzug has made on the world that we are still benefiting from?
Well, the Equality Bill, interestingly, just passed the Supreme Court last year. She introduced it in 74, 75, and it got, a hand, 20 votes or so 10 to 20 votes in favor, but it certainly did not pass Congress. But it was introduced as a measure into the Civil Rights Act, an amendment to the Civil Rights Act, as saying that LGBTQ people have as many rights as any American. And while it took 40 years for it to become law, her laying that groundwork early on has major impact. She also was one of the co-founders of the National Women's Political Caucus, which had one goal: let's get women elected. And let's find ways to support women who are running and encourage them, and do that all across the country in city councils and House seats and Senate seats. And now when Bella went to Congress, it's hard to believe, but she was one of 12 women out of 435. I mean, it's like 3%.
I know, amazing.
And today it's 101, 100 and something, just over 100, which is certainly not anywhere close to her 50-50 goal, but it's definitely an improvement in that sense.
With all the work that you've put into this film, what do you think, how do you think that she is remembered by most people today? Or do you think that she is remembered the way that she should be remembered?
I think a lot of people don't know who she is, sadly. I talk about her all the time because people ask me what I do and what I'm working on, and I can immediately tell like which direction I'm going into when I say her name, if there's any recognition on the person's face or not. Women of a certain age remember her well and think of her as a hero. People who were around in the 70s in New York certainly remember her, and people, most American, a good number of Americans too who are around in the 70s remember her because she did become a national figure. She was very well recognizable with the hat, and there being so few women in Congress. But yeah, no, the quest is really to make people aware of her and to secure her legacy, and that young women can look to her as inspiration and see that they can run for office too. They can start by making speeches on the subway like Bella did, and use their voice and be heard. So
Amen.
Part of it.
And was there or is there an interview that you were not able to get in the film? You don't have to mention any names. And if you can tell us why that particular interview, again, without mentioning any names, is important to you in terms of her story.
Definitely. There's a long list of people who we interviewed about 50 people for the film, but there was many more that we couldn't include just for length and time and budget, but also people who had passed on already and had really important stories to tell, but were no longer with us. And of course, Bella, she's the most important interview that I wish I could have interviewed her, because
Absolutely.
only she knows her story and only she knows her intentions. But we can get close by what she left us in her oral history and her books and what the interviews shared about her too.
And I want to come full circle. You said early on that about 90% of the film is completed.
Yeah.
What's left? What's ahead for you as far as moving forward with this film?
Well, we've had the disadvantage of not having any film festivals the past year and a half to showcase the film at. So, the next goal is to hopefully get it out there into the public. It's an expensive film to make, mainly because a lot of it is archival video that was housed at ABC and CBS and NBC, and they charge a lot of money for their material.
They sure do. They do.
So while we've gotten to this really amazing place of 90%, we're trying to fundraise for the remainder of the film just to buy the licensing and to get everything sort of cleaned up, and our color correction and sound mix, which are the final sort of post-production elements of a film, and just get our...
Now, you have a GoFundMe page, am I correct?
Which?
Do you have a GoFundMe page?
We don't, but maybe we should. We do have an offer on our website that if anyone pre-orders a DVD, they can, there's a bunch of different options, and that really helps us secure the funding for the rest of the film. So, I think one of the options is to have your name in the credits if you purchase a DVD, but also make a donation to the film. And that money goes directly to our final costs.
And I will put that information on my page for everyone who's watching. And it will also be included in the description of this interview, so that anybody who sees this beyond tonight, it will be the gift that keeps on giving. Tell your friends, buy dozens of DVDs. But we want to get the film into the film festivals as well. Is that an easy process?
No. I mean, that's another factor. It's just there's so many films we're competing with. Films are being made in huge numbers these days, and the film festivals have the unenviable task of going through a large number of films. So, if anyone from the major film festivals are listening, we'd love to have this story told there.
I know one person who's anxious to get it, and that's Kat Kramer, who does phenomenal work, carrying the legacy of her father forward. She knows how to pay it forward, and I bow to her. So, Kat Kramer, thank you so much. I want to ask you in our closing moments, what is your ultimate goal with this film?
My ultimate goal is for a large number of people to see it, because it has tremendous educational value. It has, I think it lays out some stark things about our society that we need to address and fix and change, starting with, gender equality and racial justice and the way our politics work. And, it's something that should inspire people. It certainly inspired me, and it's inspired people who've watched the film so far, because Bella's just, she gave all of herself to bettering our democracy and bettering democracies around the world too. In her final chapter of life, she created an NGO just to help other countries' women find their voice in making change in their country and being involved in those decisions. So it's not just an American story, it's a global story, it's an environmental story. It has a lot of impact on all the major issues affecting us today. And my goal is to let this be, a tool of education.
Well, Jeff, I want to say I could go on for 2 hours with you, maybe even 3. You inspire me on so many levels. Rosa Puzo, thank you for the suggestion for this interview. So really wonderful. Stick around for a few moments. I always like to be respectful of our guest time and those who watch tonight. There are so many places that you could have been right now, and you chose to be here with Jeff and myself. So I'm sure I can speak for Jeff. We are both very, very appreciative. I want to thank you all for being here tonight. If you enjoyed the show, and if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to Richard Skipper Celebrates on YouTube. We just passed 1,000 subscribers today. So I'm very excited about that. And also hit the like button. Leave a comment. Let both Jeff and I know what your thoughts are on what you heard here tonight. And if there's anything that I can get to Jeff, I will by all means send that to him so he can address any questions moving forward with this interview and Bella, the film. I also end every show by telling everyone to go out and do something nice for somebody else without expecting anything in return. So this is what I want you all to do tonight. I want you to go to Jeff's website, which is Jeff?
Reemergingfilms.com.
Reemergingfilms.com. And you're going to pre-order 2 copies of Bella. One for yourself, and then you're going to send one to the, let's say the 7th person that shows up in your feed. What I'm going to do for any of you who subscribe tonight, I will do a drawing and I will send a copy on me to you. So by all means do that. Let's keep the word going. Let us know a lot of people about this. I also ask everyone to go out and do something nice without expecting anything in return. Pick up the phone. Call your friends, let them know what they mean to you. Not an email message, not a text message, but a phone call. As a dear friend says, we're all in this together, but we're not in the same boat. But if you're going to be in a boat, make sure you have a skipper join you. Think about that for a moment. So anyway, Jeff, I'm going to leave the screen and I'm going to give you the platform to yourself so that you have the final word tonight. Anything that you want to say about anything that we talked about tonight that you want to expound upon, anything that we didn't talk about that you wish we had, or just any message that you want to put out to everyone who's watching right now. And Jeff, anything I can do to help you with this film, please don't hesitate to call me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. That's very, very sweet of you. And thank you for the amazing shout out and the DVD gift idea. That's truly warms my heart. And all of us who are working on the film are thankful for the support. The website, again, is reemergingfilms.com with the hyphen. And you can also go right to bella1970.com. That's the website specifically for the film. And thank you, everyone, for watching tonight. It's really nice that you spent the time with us. And I'm grateful for your support of independent film and of documentary and our next projects, which we're slowly and excitedly developing, including My Harlem that Richard mentioned. We're fundraising for that film too, and really digging deep into stories of gentrification and racial justice with that film as well, from a narrative standpoint. So similar to a documentary, but scripted and with some other interesting elements as well. So thank you as well just to Richard and to Rose for making this important suggestion. And I hope you all keep track of the film, and we look forward to bringing it to the city or cinema or streaming service. Wherever the film ends up, we'll let you know. And thank you again.